war in West Asia enters day 6 with the US and Israel continuing their bombardment of Tehran and the IDF expanding its campaign into Lebanon. We are following developments across the region on the ground. Iran fumes over a US submarine strike on an Iranian vessel near Sri Lanka, calling it an atrocity at sea. The frigate had been taking part in the Milan exercises as a guest of India, with New Delhi rejecting allegations its ports were playing host to the US Navy. Also ahead, the polls close in Nepal in what is the first election since Gen Z protests toppled the previous government. We go live there this hour for the latest. Hello and welcome. You're watching RT India. I am Osama Shah live from New Delhi. Our top focus, it remains on the developing situation in West Asia. Let's take a look at our top story.
The Iranian Navy rests at the bottom of the Persian Gulf. Decimated, destroyed, defeated.
More than 7 areas were just targeted.
Behind me is a building was targeted this morning by an airstrike.
Israel is moving against its northern neighbor Lebanon in the sky and on the ground. Troops are stationed across the border while strikes have pounded the capital, Beirut. The conflict has now impacted another nation in the region after reports of a drone strike on Azerbaijani territory. Footage circulating online shows the moment of the blast. It took place at an airport west of the country in an exclave handed to Azerbaijan during a US-brokered peace deal with Armenia. The area borders Iran, with officials there denying it targeted a neighbor. And earlier, rocket impacts were felt near Beirut's international airport as well. Israeli Defense Forces claim they targeted a Hezbollah member with 2 cars hit. Lebanese officials say more than 70 people they have been killed since Israel opened up a second front. RT reports from a residential area destroyed on Wednesday.
We're reporting now from the southern suburbs of Beirut, or what is called locally Dahi. What you see behind me is a building was targeted this morning by an airstrike, by an Israeli airstrike, and the building was destroyed. This comes after they issued an evacuation order, and it comes like this with a red marker on the building that will be targeted. And the people who's in the building or near the building have to evacuate for 300 or 500 meters. The thing is, and the dangerous thing is, that they don't specify an amount of time. Like, although it's a violation to attack the civilian building and a residential building in a residential area, and claiming that they are protecting the people and issuing these evacuation orders, but they are destroying their houses and they are destroying their belongings, and they don't give them time either to get their stuff, their clothes. They go just what's on them. We've noticed, we've been monitoring these evacuation orders, so it sometimes goes by 10 minutes, sometimes by 2 hours. So you don't know when the targeting is happening after the issuance of this evacuation order, so you have to immediately evacuate the building. Also, there's been phone calls coming to people's phones telling them to evacuate their houses without this map that we showed you. But all people have to take these calls seriously and have to evacuate their houses just in case there is some reality in it. But most of these calls come back to be part of the psychological warfare on people to just keep them stressed all the time. Even us in Dahi today, we had a call and the building just right next to us, and we had to take it seriously obviously, and we had to flee the building and to evacuate the building just as quick as we can. These are the scenes that you see in Dahi. These are residential areas, residential building. This is a printing service company. There is no presence for any military or any military personnel or any military gears here. No rockets, no weapons. You can see nothing, and you are seeing this on the footage right now.
And mass migration fears are being rekindled. Residents in southern Lebanon, they're on the move in large numbers. Evacuation orders, strikes and a ground invasion by Israel have reportedly seen tens of thousands cross into Syria. Many civilians, they are said to be heading north to areas where UN peacekeepers, they are deployed. But the big question remains, where will they go next? And could it trigger a wider crisis? The IDF, though, says it's all in the name of protecting Israel.
Hezbollah attacking, alongside the attacks from Iran, is further evidence that Hezbollah is an extension of Iran. As I said, there are no equations. We will not allow attacks from Lebanese territory, and we will not allow harm to IDF forces.
The IDF claims to have completed its 12th wave of attacks on Tehran. This is exclusive footage taken by our bureau in the Iranian capital. A statement made by Israel said it hit the headquarters of the internal security forces in Iran, believed to be the command center for the country's special military units. RT's bureau chief in Tehran has been taking stock of the damage. Take a look.
We just came here to film the Borjeri Sharak complex. As you can see, the area was just targeted by Israel. It was just attacked. We are now in eastern Tehran, where U.S.-Israeli attacks are being carried out. More than 6-7 areas were just targeted. We are in the Caravan neighborhood, an area adjacent to the Borjeri buildings, which were completely destroyed on Wednesday. We came here to film, and many civilians were here. Those areas which were just targeted are also packed with civilians.
And Tehran has lashed out at Washington after a U.S. submarine attacked an Iranian frigate in the Indian Ocean. The Iranian foreign minister didn't mince his words, vowing revenge.
The U.S. has perpetrated an atrocity at sea, 2,000 miles away from Iran's shores. Frigate Dina, a guest of India's Navy carrying almost 130 sailors, was struck in international waters without warning. Mark my words, the U.S. will come to bitterly regret the precedent it has set.
And I'm now joined by RT India's Ridhima Kedia here in the studio. Ridhima, what is the latest on the frigate attack in the Indian Ocean?
See, the footage released by U.S. Department of Defense clearly shows the exact moment a torpedo hit Iranian warship Iris Dena, causing the ship to in fact break and also sink very quickly. Now, the video as seen in the coverage confirmed the scale of the attack and also the immediate aftermath, with Sri Lankan rescue teams in fact reaching there only to find oil patches and life rafts upon arrival. So, 87 sailors who had died in that particular incident were in fact returning from the International Fleet Review in Visakhapatnam on India's eastern coast. Now, just days before, they had in fact participated in the joint naval exercises with different navies across India. Now, the sinking of the Iranian warship has obviously brought the war to India's doorsteps. And Sri Lankan authorities have in fact confirmed that more than 30 people were rescued. Several bodies were also recovered from the sea. And the injured people were in fact brought to the government hospital on the southern port city of Gaul for treatment. Now, Sri Lankan authorities have also confirmed that its navy in fact received a distress call, and they had immediately alerted the Air Force in that particular situation. And then the Air Force and the Navy collaborated together to launch the search and rescue operation post that. Now, what is interesting to watch is that another vessel is near Sri Lanka, and Colombo is keeping a very close eye on that. Take a look.
The ship is not in Sri Lankan waters. It is located in the exclusive economic zone. The government and the Defense Ministry are aware. The government is involved in providing maximum intervention pertaining to the lives of those on board.
Now, Iran has asked Sri Lanka to repatriate the bodies of those Iranian sailors so that they can, offer them the final respects. But, as the conflict goes on, obviously it'll be very difficult to repatriate the body at the moment. So therefore, Sri Lankan authorities have, in fact, arranged for a temporary storage at a mortuary of Karapitya Hospital there. Now, the attack obviously happened in the Indian Ocean. Indian Ocean is India's strategic backyard. And in fact, the Indian Navy calls themselves the guardian of that particular ocean. But obviously, the United States clearly kept us uninformed about this entire thing the entire time. And therefore, what analysts point out is also a fact that India and the United States have been partners in the Quad, where intel sharing on developments in the Indian Ocean is quite important. So now, if you look at the latest developments, India's External Affairs Minister, Dr. S. Jaishankar, spoke to his Iranian counterpart only this afternoon. The details of that particular conversation remain awaited at this point in time. On the other hand, Foreign Secretary Vikram Misri, in fact, on the behalf of Government of India, signed the condolence book at the Embassy of Iran in New Delhi to offer condolences to the former Supreme Leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. Now, furthermore, the Ministry of External Affairs has strongly, in fact, denied claims that the U.S. Navy is using Indian ports. New Delhi has also called all of those reports not just misleading, but also completely baseless at this point in time. They've effectively ran fact checks also and have firmly, rejected the statement made on the American news network. Now, remember that India has traditionally maintained a non-aligned stance when it comes to these conflicts. They've always taken a stand of dialogues and diplomacy, and I've always advocated for the same.
All right. Rhythm Acadia, thank you very much for getting us all those details. And I'm now joined by Mr. Nitin Gokhale. He's an author and national security analyst. Mr. Gokhale, thank you very much for speaking with RT India. You know, this confrontation between the two nations, it has largely been centered in West Asia so far. How dangerous and how alarming is it that it has spilled into Indian Ocean waters, sir?
Well, thank you very much for having me. It certainly is dangerous and alarming for the entire globe, I would say, because no war really is good for the economy and order across the entire world. And if this kind of a conflict between nations which are belligerent, which are probably flouting the rules and laws of warfare with impunity, then it becomes a problem for other nations around the theater of conflict. And as we saw on Wednesday, the Iranian ship which was sunk by a US submarine torpedo attack has brought the war to the doorsteps of the Indian Ocean, or in the Indian Ocean onto the doorsteps of Sri Lanka and India, which is not really palatable to any peace-loving country or its people. So therefore, it indeed is alarming.
Mr. Gokhale, given its location along some of the world's busiest sea lanes, Sri Lanka's location, of course, how exposed is Sri Lanka if tensions become between these major powers? They continue to escalate. How exposed is Sri Lanka and how exposed is India?
Well, Sri Lanka is definitely worried and alarmed from the discussions that I have had with some friends in Colombo. That country is just emerging out of a difficult period, first brought in by COVID and then the aftermath of a change, rather sudden change of government there. And its economic condition was precarious. It was just about coming out of that. But now, if this confrontation or conflict comes to its doorsteps and to the sea lines of communication or the sea lanes for transit and trade, which goes through Indian Ocean, then Sri Lanka suffers the most because port calls by merchant ships to Sri Lanka and then the Colombo port as a transshipment port for countries around Sri Lanka, particularly India, where 60% of India's traffic, the goods traffic is transshipped at Colombo port, which brings in a lot of revenue to Sri Lanka. which might get affected. Insurance companies might not just hike the rates of insurance for ships coming to Colombo, which will have disastrous economic effect on Sri Lanka itself. For India, it's not yet very clear what kind of fallout it will have, but certainly if this continues, then India's energy security comes under some kind of a threat, because 40% of India's crude oil requirement comes through the Strait of Hormuz, which is closed right now, and one doesn't know how long this conflict will go on. Now, if that happens, then India will have to, of course, take steps to rectify the situation, look for alternative sources. But right now, it's up in the air, it's uncertain, and no country and no trading country like India would like this uncertainty to continue. Definitely not Sri Lanka, which is in a precarious financial condition.
When you speak about India and when you speak about India finding alternative sources, is Russia one of the options?
It is the best option and the biggest option, certainly.
Yeah.
It goes without saying that Russia will then emerge again as India's go-to source for crude oil. But again, all this depends on how long this conflict continues, how long the closure of Strait of Hormuz continues. And of course, then India will also try and hedge its bets, as it has done in the past 4 or 5 years, to source as much crude from Russia, given the kind of volatility that it faces right now. And about the consequences of getting crude from Russia, I think India will deal with it when it wants to cross the bridge, when the time comes to cross that bridge.
Yeah. So many of the reports, it suggests that this US operation, it was carried out without any prior consultation with the regional countries, whether it is Sri Lanka, whether it is India. If that is the case, how alarming is it that US decides to bomb an Iranian ship in Indian waters without consulting it with India or Sri Lanka?
Well, first of all, it's not Indian waters. I think let's be clear about it. It's what is called in naval parlance high seas, what is called in civilian parlance international waters. It was not even in the Sri Lankan territorial waters. So I think the US chose the position very cleverly. Of course, questions have been raised about whether India was informed, whether India was aware, whether Sri Lanka was aware. But we don't know the circumstances under which this hit was carried out or this operation was carried out.
But Mr. Gokhale, does that raise concerns about transparency and coordination in such sensitive waters?
Well, there is no, during times of conflict, there is no transparency. No nation shares that kind of information. And let me put this on the table, that even if, let's assume for a moment that India knew so many submarines are traversing these waters in Indian Ocean, the intent will never be declared or known to anybody. Submarines come and go from in the international waters, not just US but Chinese submarines, I'm sure. Indian submarines also lurk around these waters, trying to find out or at least keep a watch. But the intent is never clear, and that is what I think most people are missing the point. That even if, assuming, and I'm saying assuming, if India knew about it, there is very little India could have done before this operation or this hit took place. Post that hit, certainly the Sri Lankans did what best they could do to rescue the injured people and the sailors there. 32 of them, last known, have been rescued, but most others have died and the ship has sunk. But that is the reality, a brutal reality of war and conflict, where many laws, rules, conventions are flouted. But to blame a country which is close by, but which does not have any control over the high seas, is absolutely absurd.
Okay. Finally, Mr. Gokhale, could we begin to see a greater naval deployments by global powers in the Indian Ocean if this crisis deepens, sir?
Could you repeat that question, please?
I'm saying, could we begin to see greater naval deployments by, say, for example, global powers like US, like other global powers in the Indian Ocean if this crisis continues to deepen?
Oh, definitely. Indian Ocean is a contested space. There have been now instances of European powers now looking at Indo-Pacific, not particularly Indian Ocean, but Indian Ocean is part of the Indo-Pacific, declaring their intent and their policies and their doctrines for the Indo-Pacific of freedom of navigation, patrols, of passage through the Indian Ocean and then going to the Pacific. And that is only bound to increase. And India is also likely to then relook at its deployment patterns, its requirement for the Indian Navy, and how it can be then further strengthened or empowered to have a much closer look and a greater visibility of the military traffic traversing through these waters. I think it's inevitable now.
Well, the war has triggered global concerns over shipping routes and energy prices. With the joint US-Israel aggression triggering chaos in the Middle East, demand for Russian energy is on the rise again. Once illegally sanctioned or taboo, Russian oil and gas might now be the safest and most viable options for global buyers, including India. In fact, the stakes are particularly high, with West Asia being a hub for energy around the globe, leaving limited alternatives. This region, it holds nearly half of the world's proven oil reserves. That's including 5 of the world's 7 largest oil reserves spread across nations currently dragged into the conflict, from Saudi Arabia to Iraq, the UAE and Kuwait. The Middle East, it accounts for over 30% of global oil production, while the Strait of Hormuz, it is a critical choke point with roughly 20% of all oil exports passing through it. Investment in the region's energy sector is huge. It was estimated $130 billion were pumped into the market last year. And since the outbreak of conflict, the Gulf's critical energy network, it has been in the crosshairs. In Saudi Arabia, the Ras Tanura oil refinery, it was hit by drone debris and shut. In Qatar, it's Ras Laffan LNG hub and Misaid, the industrial city, they were struck. Over in the UAE, attacks were reported on 2 fuel terminals, and in Oman, key ports have been affected. In fact, the impact will be far and wide, with reports suggesting Europe, it might need a rethink on its ban of Russian energy. But President Putin, he served up a quick reminder about who has the control of the valve.
It's more profitable for us to stop supplying the European market right now. Instead, go to those markets that are opening up and gain a foothold there. I want to be clear that there's no political motive here either. But if we're going to be shut down in a month or 2, wouldn't it be better to stop now and move to other countries that are reliable partners and gain a foothold there? But that's not a solution. In this case, it's just me thinking out loud, so to speak.
The polls have closed in Nepal's landmark election, the first since its government was ousted last year by Gen Z-inspired demonstrations. The voter turnout is estimated to be around 45%, with 19 million people eligible there to cast their ballot. For the race itself, it is being viewed as a battle between the country's youth and the political old guard. In fact, RT India's Vinayak Dikshit is standing by in Nepal's capital. Vinayak, what's the latest from there?
Right, absolutely. So the historic and crucial general elections here in Nepal have concluded with a 45% voter turnout, which was recorded till 4 p.m. in the evening today. The process of transporting the ballot boxes from the polling stations to the counting centers has already concluded amid heavy security deployment at this particular polling station here in the capital city of Kathmandu. Barring one incident where police firing was reported from a polling station located east of Kathmandu, the rest of the election process here in Nepal went rather smoothly. So, of the 275 seats in the Nepali House of Representatives, 165 are contested through the FPTP or First Past the Post system. The remaining 110 are contested through something known as the PR system or the Proportionate Representation system. Now, talking about the contenders here, former Kathmandu Mayor Balin Shah, who's being seen as the face of change, as the face of the Gen Z, also casted his vote today in the capital city of Kathmandu at the Annapurna English School, which is located here in Kathmandu. Apart from that, former Prime Minister KP Sharma Oli, who was ousted last year in the month of September as a result of the Gen Z protests which took place, also casted his vote here in Kathmandu, along with the Prime Ministerial candidate from the Nepali Congress, Gagan Thapa. Now, if we talk about this particular election, if we talk about these polls, they are being seen as an attempt for a political reset where the Gen Z or the young voters are seeking accountability, are seeking jobs, and are seeking an end to the corruption which has been rampant here in Nepal. So basically, this happens to be an election which was dominated by the Gen Z. After speaking to a range of young voters here in Kathmandu, we got a sense that the old political ways are no longer going to resonate with this young generation of voters who have emerged here. Now, moving on to the geopolitical aspect of these elections, I spoke to the Prime Ministerial candidate from the Nepali Congress, Gagan Thapa. He spoke at length about the future of India and Nepal relations.
As we are so culturally connected,
Right.
it's beyond the national government.
Yes, sir.
It's people to people. It's real people to people.
Yes, sir.
So, and then whenever we decide anything about India Nepal, we have to all the time take into that notice that Nepal has a very unique relationship with India. So, and which is at people to people level and across Nepal.
Now, these polls in Nepal were being very closely watched by New Delhi as well as capitals all around the world. Since Nepal is located strategically between India and China, political stability in Kathmandu, political stability in Nepal is crucial for stability in the region as well.
All right. Vinayak Dikshit, thank you very much for getting us all those details. In fact, we also have with us Yubraj Gemire. He's a journalist. Mr. Gemire, thank you very much for speaking with RT India. You know, the turnout number that we have so far, it says 40 to 45%. These are not very encouraging numbers, considering that the entire youth of Nepal, they came out on the streets to demonstrate and overthrew the government. How do you look at this turnout, first of all?
Well, the Election Commission just now said about 60% votes have been cast. That is still a preliminary figure, but I think it's around 60.
So you expect that number to increase?
I don't expect to increase beyond 60%. But even that number doesn't quite match the enthusiasm and expectation that was being felt here.
Yeah. But what exactly happened? Were the young voters, were they as active as expected, or did that enthusiasm fall short?
No, I think it was a kind of hype, through the social media, especially the RSP, stepped up its kind of a social media campaign. What we see partly. What has happened, Iran-US conflict, where large number of Nepalese live in the US, that diaspora could be as active as it was expected. That also made a change in the whole atmosphere in Nepal.
Mr. Gemire, before I ask you anything, what are your expectations of these elections? What are you expecting from the results?
Well, 2-3 things, very important. One is these elections, this midterm poll, may start a new precedence of midterm polls being frequent, because so far the Constitution had very clearly stated that, unless you explore all the possibilities of forming an alternative government, Parliament cannot be dissolved. It has happened now. And also the fact that this parliament, like in the past, is going to be a hung one with no party likely to get absolute majority. That will increase the chance of executives taking the liberty to dissolve parliament in every uncomfortable situation. And third, we'll see problems in formation of the government. But one positive thing I see is this time, like in the past, they will not decide who will be the prime minister for 6 months, then another 6 months or so. This time, they will come to some kind of common minimum programs and decide, inform the government on that basis.
And do you believe that it's because of it's the result of the entire population coming together to give them that message that, look, this is how you need to perform?
Well, yes, but again, Nepal's political parties and past government, there is one thing in common: none of them has taken any accountability for their failure or success.
Okay.
And they have always pursued politics driven by power, not by principles and not by common programs. So this time they might take a lesson from this.
Mr. Ghimire, regardless of who wins, what must be the next government do? What should the next government prioritize in order to restore the public trust?
Well, we have to take into account the background why this election, was forced. One is in strict anti-corruption measure. Two, investigation about corruption in higher places.
Yeah.
But practically that is not possible because it's also going to be a coalition government in which you have to compromise on certain things. Mm-hmm. So unfortunately, the Gen Z spirit is going to be the first casualty. But having said that, I'd say that economic growth, increasing the pace of development, time-bound completion of the developmental projects, and clean governance, efficient governance, they are the expectation of the people, and that has to be their, priority.
Okay, Mr. Ghimire.
On the foreign relations, and also the government has to maintain a very strict balance between India and China.
Yeah, I was about to ask you that, because for India, Nepal, it is a sensitive neighbor with an open border. What kind of political outcome is beneficial for both Nepal as well as India?
Well, for India, I think India quite interfered in Nepal's political radical change in 2006. Then course of instability began from there. Now I think India has also learned a lesson. The relation was very bitter in between. So India leaves to the Nepalese to conduct their domestic politics, caring more about, India's security interest, and that Nepali territory is not used against India. And so is the expectation from China also. That has to be very tightrope walk and efficient handling of the diplomatic relations.
All right, Mr. Yuvraj Ghimire, thank you very much for speaking with RT India.
Thank you.
And Sri Lanka's Prime Minister has spoken exclusively to our show India, Russia and the World. Harini Amarasuriya shared her views on energy sovereignty, diplomacy and more with our head of news, Ranjan Sharma. You can in fact watch it in full right here on RT India. Up next.